In the world's two oldest and most successful democracies for a long time, the top personnel arouse feelings between aversion and apathy, and thus scare off voters. Pollsters predict a lower voter turnout than recently. For his election campaign after 18 years of Tory government in 1997, Tony Blair chose a song that became an anthem overnight. Things Can Only Get Better, the hit by an Irish band called Dream. Yeah, everything can only get better. Labour frontman Blair won a historic landslide victory in those spring days, and things actually got better after that. Not only many Britons dream of the cool Britannia decade to this day. Now, after 14 years with the Tories, the United Kingdom is on the verge of another Labour victory. But the parallel is not without that triumphant moment in 1997, but with the United States of America. On the other side of the Atlantic, voters also have to vote on a new government. But it's not an anthem that's spreading on both sides, but a completely different phenomenon. That of the double haters who cannot do anything with any of the options offered to them. So in the world's two oldest and most successful democracies, the top personnel arouse feelings ranging from aversion to apathy, as I said. An 81-year-old head of state who millions of Americans no longer believe has the cognitive or physical ability to hold office. He's competing with a 77-year-old ex-president who is accused in 4 criminal cases and may even be convicted in one case in the next few days, and who's already destabilizing the Western alliance with his loose comments. When the Conservative British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced the election date, and you remember that in the pouring rain outside Downing Street number 10, the Labour Party immediately sent a mass email to its supporters, and the subject was change. New things, new beginnings usually trigger, if not magic, then at least euphoria. But Keir Starmer, the Labour leader and most likely the next British Prime Minister after July 4th, is not receiving a storm of enthusiasm. According to polls, only 14% of Britons say they are looking forward to a Starmer victory. The foreseeable change in Westminster will instead be due to the fact that voters in the UK are fed up with the quarrelling Tories and years of economic stagnation and the decline of public services. The country is run down, and that is only partly to do with Brexit. The voters also know that, unlike in 97, Labour will find no money at all in the Tory coffers. The British state is financially bled dry, even though the Conservatives have cut almost everything they could, which is why neither the future personnel nor their resources give any reason to hope that things will really get better. A low level of mobilization resulting either from pessimism, apathy or aversion is the scenario that campaigners fear in the United Kingdom and the USA. For the British Labour Party, a low voter turnout does not pose too great a risk thanks to the disastrous polls for Sunak and his Tories. But the spirit of optimism is getting different numbers. In surveys, 25% of Britons said after Sunak's election announcement that they were indifferent to the vote. Just 29% expressed their joy at the date that has now been set. Without the boost from the mandate of young Britons in particular, Starmer will not receive the starting bonus he needs to push through the many necessary and painful reforms and cuts after July 4th. In the USA, meanwhile, there is an aversion among many voters which is affecting both Joe Biden's and Donald Trump's chances of winning, which is dangerous for both candidates because in the so-called swing states, a few thousand votes will ultimately decide victory or defeat. The respective core clientele of both may even be overmotivated. But it's Trump's MAGA supporters with their Make America Great Again vision, in which Washington's corrupt institutions from the courts to the FBI are swept away by a re-elected Trump. Be it the Democrats whose almost fear-inducing election message is that only a Biden victory can protect America's democracy and the rule of law from Trump's supposed destructive rage. Two such extreme scenarios, one would assume, would force voters to choose between the two candidates. in reality, they are a deterrent. At 43%, independents, people who set their political home neither with the Democrats nor with the Republicans, are by far the largest group of voters in the USA and have been for almost 20 years. Of these, 42% say that neither Biden nor Trump is a good candidate. Many of those, what they call double haters, will therefore stay at home. Policy analysts predict that significantly fewer voters will go to the polls on November 5th than in 2020. At that time, turnout reached a historically high 67%, driven primarily by those who did not want Trump in the White House for another 4 years. The current voter lethargy seems astonishing at first glance. In November, the candidates are the same as back then, Trump against Biden. On top of that, the 2020 election took place in the middle of the pandemic under adverse conditions. But back then, millions of Americans wanted to use their vote to prevent a second Trump term. Today, in the eyes of most Americans, Biden's years in office are 4 largely chaos-free years in the Oval Office, but also years without convincing economic and social impulses and with 2 major wars. Which is why, according to studies, up to 20% of voters, both independent and Democratic or Republican, identify as double haters because neither Biden nor Trump's presidency offers them an option. Some, frustrated, accuse the Democrats of lacking foresight in not having built up one or more potential successors early in Biden's term in office, or at least a more convincing vice president. Others accuse the Republicans of not having a defense strategy against Trump's MAGA power at first and then given in like a domino. Unlike the man in the White House and his challenger, the reserved Keir Starmer does not attract much hatred from voters. But recently, the conservative Spectator complained that apart from the rather uninspiring Sir Softy, none of the otherwise sharp-tongued English commentators had yet come up with a decent nickname for the Social Democrat. And that also speaks volumes. After the election, however, Starmer will have to solve a number of problems if he is successful. One of the richest countries in the world, a member of the 7 leading industrial nations G7, allows around 2.4 million children in the country, that's 17% of all children, to have no food security. And this means that it is uncertain whether they will get enough to eat every day for a month. Another 10% of children live in households where money is barely enough for food. That is from a report of the British Medical Journal. It cites the report on the food security of British households for 22 and 23, which the British Department for Work and Pensions published in March. Compared to the 2019-20 survey, almost 1 million additional children in Great Britain have found themselves in this precarious situation within just a few years. The survey asks about food security in the past 30 days. Poor values are an indicator of poverty and are associated with poorer nutrition, poorer health, poorer development, and more mental health problems. In Canada, people are asked about food security in the past 12 months, for example. In 23, statistically 1 in 5 children were unsure whether there was always enough food at home. In the USA, 17.4% of households with children reported being affected by food insecurity in 22, according to the BMJ. In December 23, The Guardian quoted the chair of the Royal British Association of General Practitioners, Camilla Hawthorne. We hear of parents who deny themselves meals so that their children have something to eat. And a pediatrician in Whittington confirmed that she's seeing more children with iron deficiency or rickets due to vitamin D and calcium deficiencies. It's a hidden crisis that will have long-term effects because malnutrition affects children's mental development, among other things. As a nation, we should not have malnourished children. We should not have children with rickets. We should not have people with iron deficiency or low folic acid, is what Hawthorne told The Guardian. I have an aversion to giving people supplements in a rich country where they should be able to afford food, she said. And this says quite a lot. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.